Welcome to the world of Stranger Stitches, where I set small fires in dark corners of crime and history. I'm rated at least PG for language and content, and this is not a news story. Just compiling the facts as I found them. I'm an old lady with a crochet hook and a microphone. So, sit your shapely ass down and buckle up, Buttercup. Today we take a look into the twisted life of Carl Panzram. Honestly, y'all, I have put off doing this story because he's one of the most interesting serial killers out there, even though this happened a long time ago. But there's a lot of details that it's hard to say on, episodes of YouTube's. This dude is evil, wicked, mean, and nasty, and there is no way to make YouTube like it. Apparently their standards are a little higher than mine because I believe in using strong and accurate words for the big topics. So without trying to get myself kicked out of here, I'll do my best. Y'all ever wonder when you take a kid, beat him on nearly a daily basis, and throw him in reform school to get raped and tortured, and then he spends the next 30 years bouncing around prisons like a damn volleyball? Well, what you get is Carl Panzram. And let me tell you, he's meaner than a cottonmouth. His blood type was anger, and his hobby was death. That's right, y'all. Other people's death. Charles Carl Panzram was born on June 28, 1891, on a dirt-poor farm near East Grand Forks, Minnesota. His folks were Prussian immigrants. Now, here's what I know about Prussia. They're very impressive people. It is a chunk of what's now Germany and Poland, and that kind of got resectioned after World War I. They are actually known for having their shit together, especially when it comes to education. They had mandatory schooling for children, and teachers had to be trained and educated themselves. When most of the world was letting their kids run wild, and anybody who wanted to be a teacher could just kind of step up and say they wanted to do it. It's ironic that Carl's parents came from a place that valued learning and discipline, considering how their boy turned out. Or maybe that's why they left. Or maybe Carl just took after dear old dad, who was no shining star himself. For a time, Carl's folks worked their fingers to the bone and still couldn't make ends meet. When Carl was only 7, Daddy took off, just walked out one day and never came back. Now, nobody wants to be in that situation, but you made them kids, buddy. Leaving 5 kids and a wife to tend for themselves on a failing farm, that's just freaking cold. Women didn't have the options they do today. A paying job was just about out of the question. And even now, that would have left Mom with a very heavy cross to bear and very few options. But back in the day, that family didn't stand a chance. Here's the thing that'll twist your gut. While Carl was turning into this monster, most of his brother and sisters grew up to be decent, hardworking folks. Those are his words. Carl himself admitted that his siblings became honest and dedicated farmers, but his standards of honest and dedicated might be a little different than ours. I just wonder about that. So makes me wonder, too, what the hell went wrong with him? Life wasn't easy for any of the Panzram kids. They were all forced to work on that failing farm from just about the time they could walk. When the government started cracking down on truancy and demanding that kids go to school, Carl's parents came up with a brilliant solution. Make the kids work the fields at night, after school. Carl claimed he only got about 2 hours of sleep at night before having to drag his happy ass back to school the next day. The abuse wasn't just hard work either. Carl later wrote about being beaten regularly, chained up as punishment, and starved when he stepped out of line. I'm sure that food was pretty scarce as it was, and having what little there was taken away, wow. They just took his brain out and played with it, didn't they? And it wasn't just Carl either that was getting this treatment. They dealt it out to all the other siblings as well. The family kept getting hit with tragedy too. In May of 1905, Carl's older stepbrother, now it doesn't say which side of the step came from, Lewis Price, drowned while working as a lumberjack. Eventually, 4 of Carl's 5 older brothers said, fuck this, and left home, probably figuring out Anything had to be better than staying on the farm. Carl later claimed his brothers beat the shit out of him on a regular basis, which really didn't help his already twisted development. What's really chilling is that out of all these kids that grew up in the exact same hellish condition, only Carl became a killer. Makes one scratch one's head. You can grow up under any circumstances, and at some point the choice becomes yours. The rest of them somehow managed to turn into okay citizens. But, it doesn't define okay in here. The poverty and the dysfunction that tells you something was fundamentally wrong with Carl, something darker. And all those beatings and starvation just made it worse. Normally when I'm telling stories about these people's backgrounds, I get the feels for the little kids. I mean, they're abused when they're young, and I wonder if any of that had changed, would it have made a difference? But Carl? I don't know. I'm just not feeling it. Carl wasn't exactly what you'd call a good kid to begin with. He claimed he was lying and stealing by the age of 5, and this little shit was proud of it. By 8 years old, right after Dad took off, he was getting arrested for being drunk and disorderly. And before you start thinking, well, that's just boys being boys, remember, we're talking about an 8-year-old. Where was Mom's supervision? Were there no older children saying, Carl, don't drink that? Maybe they were giving it to him. It didn't say, and I don't know. Then Carl turned 12. He got caught breaking into a neighbor's house, stealing a cake and apples, and a revolver. Yeah. His brothers beat him unconscious when they found out, but the damage was already done. He got caught. The courts shipped him off to the Minnesota State Training School in Red Wing, and that didn't do him any good. You see, this reform school was supposed to straighten kids out. Instead, it was a house of horrors itself. Carl tells you that he was repeatedly beaten, tortured, and raped by the other boys. Carl later said they had a workshop, and if they took you there, nothing good happened. It was called the paint shop because of all the blood and bruises left behind. You were red and blue when you left there. These bastards didn't reform Carl. They turned him into something truly ugly and dangerous. His words, I was reformed all right, he wrote. I had been taught by Christians how to be a hypocrite, and I had learned more about stealing, lying, hating, burning, and killing. I had learned that a boy's penis could be used for something besides urination, and that the rectum could be used for other purposes. See, this is why YouTube don't like me. But this is a story that rarely gets told. Before he left that hellhole, Carl set fire to the paint shop. I don't know if I'd have done that, but I might have. Well, he got sent back home, and then he ran away at the age of 14. Carl got himself assaulted, gang style, by a group of homeless men in a train car. He said it made him a sadder, sicker, and wiser boy, and it sure as hell didn't make him any more gentle on the world. For the next 16 years, Carl Panzram was a one-man crime wave. That sumbitch was built like a brick shithouse, 6 feet tall, cold gray eyes covered in tattoos. He had what you might call a shocking talent for escaping from jail, sawing through bars and setting fires to bust out whenever the mood struck him. There was hardly a jail cell made that would hold him any longer than he wanted to be there. And Carl didn't just steal shit, though Lord knows he stole plenty. He robbed, he burned down buildings, he abused over 1,000 men and boys. And he said, not because he was so homosexual, but because it was his way of establishing domination and humiliating people. Wonder where he learned that. He says that he killed 21 people that he confessed to. Only 5 could ever be proven, but I think Carl was kind of proud of his body count. He may have diminished it a little bit because of all the time that he was out there. He knew 21 had killed outright, but some of them he left with enough damage to die later, and he might not have counted those if he didn't actually have hands-on knowledge of it. One of Carl's most notorious capers happened in 1920 when he specifically targeted the home of former President William Howard Taft. You might be wondering why the hell Carl had it out for the former president. Well, it goes back to Carl's time in the Army. Carl had enlisted in 1907, got himself stationed at Fort William Henry Harrison, but being Carl, he couldn't keep his mouth shut even in the military. He got himself court-martialed for insubordination and theft. Well, they shipped his sorry ass off to the military prison at Fort Leavenworth. Taft was Secretary of the War at the time, and Carl blamed him personally for the brutal treatment he received during his 3-year stretch in that hellhole. Well, Fort Leavenworth wasn't just any prison. It was where you sent the worst of military criminals, and the guards there made the reform school look like a Sunday picnic. Yeah, Carl was beaten, tortured, and God knows what else. That's the way YouTube wants me to say it. When he finally got out with a dishonorable discharge, he was mad about it and looking for someone to blame. In his little twisted thought process, that someone was William Howard Taft. So in 1920, when Mr. Taft was living the good life as a former president and Yale law professor, Carl decided it was time for payback. He cased Taft's fancy New Haven house, waited for the right moment, broke in, cleaned the place out. He made off with jewelry, bearer bonds worth thousands, and Taft's own personal .45 caliber pistol. With the stolen money, Carl bought himself a yacht called the Acesta, and the sick fuck started luring sailors aboard with promises of free booze and a good time. Once they got drunk, he abused them and shot them with Taft's own stolen gun and then dumped their bodies near Execution Rocks Light off the New York coast. The irony wasn't lost on Carl. He kind of was smiling about it, using the former president's own weapon to commit the murders. He claimed he got 10 this way, and knowing Carl's track record, he probably wasn't exaggerating. That bastard took particular pleasure in knowing that every time he pulled the trigger, he was using Taft's own gun to do it. It was his own sick way of getting revenge on the man he blamed for turning him into an even worse monster than he already was. You know, honestly, he could have gotten there on his own, but yeah, using Taft's pistol, that was a cherry on an already fucked up little cupcake. Not content with just terrorizing folks in the States, Carl decided to take his show on the road in 1921. He stowed away on a ship bound for Portuguese Angola in Africa, figuring a change of scenery might do him good. Once he got there, Carl managed to talk his way into a job as a foreman on an oil rig. You'd think a little honest work would be good for him, but no. This is Panzram we're talking about. The man couldn't stop causing trouble for 5 minutes, and working in the African heat just made him meaner. It didn't take long before he abused and unalived an 11 or 12-year-old boy. Those were his words, and they're chilling as hell. His brains were coming out his ears when I left him, and he'll never be any deader. End quote. The casual way he wrote this down about the tale of this child tells you everything you need to know about what was left of his soul if he ever had one to start with. Well, Carl wasn't done spreading his particular brand of evil across that continent. A few days later, he hired 6 local guides for what he claimed was a crocodile hunting expedition. These poor bastards thought they was going to get an honest wage by taking a crazy American out to do some crocodile hunting. Instead, Carl shot all 6 of them and fed their bodies to the crocodiles. Even for Carl, that was next level. And because burning and destroying things tickled him as well, Carl torched the oil rig before he left Angola. Just out of pure spite, as he put it, the man couldn't leave anything without setting fire and leaving death in his wake. About a year later, Carl got tired of the African heat and decided it was time to move on. His next step was supposed to be Lisbon, but as it turned out, Portuguese authorities were on to him, and they were waiting for him. So Carl had to figure out another way to sneak back to his favorite hunting ground, the good old U.S. of A. Carl meets the end of his road when his final arrest came in 1928 for burglary in Washington, D.C. This time, instead of giving a fake name like usual, he told them exactly who he was and confessed to damn near everything. He was tired of running. While waiting for his trial, something very strange happened. A young prison guard named Henry Lester took pity on this monster and started slipping him a little money for cigarettes. Carl was so shocked by this simple act of kindness that Lesser gave him some writing materials, and he wrote his entire life story, over 40,000 words of pure, unfiltered evil. In my lifetime, I have murdered 21 human beings, Carl wrote. I have committed thousands of burglaries, robberies, larcenies, arsons, and last but not least, I have committed acts on more than 1,000 male human beings. And for all these things, I am not the least bit sorry. I have no conscience, so that doesn't worry me. I don't believe in man, God, or the devil. I hate the whole world, the whole damn human race, including myself. But Carl wasn't done sharing his twisted philosophy. He went on. I made up my mind that I would rob, burn, destroy, and kill everywhere I went, and everybody I could, long as I lived. I had to sit with that for a minute. That was my comment. I was so full of hate that there was no room in me for anything such as love, pity, kindness, honor, or decency. My only regret is that I wasn't born dead or not at all. And if you think he found some religion in his final days, like some do, think again. Carl had some choice words about that too. Naturally, I now love Jesus very much. Yes, I love him so damn much that I'd like to crucify him all over again. They shipped Carl off to Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary. It's like old home for him, right? With a 25-year sentence. But he wasn't planning on serving it. He warned the warden that he'd kill the first man who tried to bother him. And on June 20th, 1929, he made good on that threat. He beat a prison foreman, Robert Warnke, to death with an iron bar. Well, that got Carl a date with the hangman. When human rights activists showed up and tried to appeal his death sentence, Carl told them to go F themselves. The only thanks you and your kind will ever get from me for your efforts on my behalf is that I wish you all had one neck and that my hands were on it. I have no desire whatever to reform myself. My only desire is to reform people who try to reform me, and I believe the only way to reform people is to kill them. On September 5th, 1930, they led Carl Panzram up to the gallows. His last words to the executioner, you might wonder? He said, "Yes, hurry it up, you Hoosier bastard. I could kill a dozen men while you're still screwing around." Something that keeps me up nights, and I wonder sometime, was Carl Panzram born evil, or did society create him? Psychopath versus sociopath. The man himself blamed everyone but himself, and saying, "I did not make myself what I am. Others had the making of me." Dr. Carl Menninger, one of the pioneers of modern psychology, called Carl the logical product of our prison system. And looking at his life, it's hard to argue with that assessment. Every time society tried to fix Carl, they just made him worse. But here's what really gets me. Carl had this weird sort of selective empathy. He could abuse and murder other human beings without batting an eye, but he felt genuine remorse about mistreating animals. "I'm only sorry for two things," he wrote. "I'm sorry that I have mistreated some few animals in my lifetime, and I'm sorry that I am unable to murder the whole damn human race." Oh, that guard, Henry Lesser, spent 40 years trying to get Carl's autobiography published because he believed that people needed to understand how the system had failed. That book finally came out in 1970 as Killer a journal of murder, and it's still one of the most chilling things I've ever read. You needn't bother. I've given it to you in a nutshell right here. Carl Panzram died at 39 years old. He did all this in 39 years. Sorry they didn't catch him earlier. Unrepentant to the very end. He never asked for forgiveness, never showed remorse to any of his victims, went to his death wishing that he could have killed more. He was a product of his time and circumstances, sure enough, but that doesn't make him any less terrifying. Some monsters are made, not born, but once they're made, there ain't no going back. And that's where I can leave Carl Panzram, right there on the gallows. That's all for this episode of Stranger Stitches. Y'all sleep tight now and try not to think too hard about people like him. Some questions don't have answers that'll make you feel any better. Sweet dreams. I'll see y'all next time.